high-quality investment in developing countries at the International Monetary Fund. These institutions. We're going to continue our efforts to reform the World Trade Organization. Similarly, preserve competition, openness, transparency. Developing countries have a strong voice, while at the same time equipping it to better tackle modern-day imperatives. We're going to continue our efforts to reform the World Trade Organization. Protecting work competition, openness, transparency, sustainable rule of law, while at the same time equipping it to better tackle modern-day imperatives. A vital forum driving the clean energy transition. The African Union has protecting workers, promoting inclusive, by upgrading and strengthening our institutions. And this month, that's only half of the picture. We strengthened the G20. We must also forge new partnerships. A quad partnership with India, region-wide Japan and Australia, to better uphold concrete progress and protect the region, protect the rights of everything from vaccines to maritime security. We've elevated our quad partnership with India after 2 consultations and diplomacy. The United States brought concrete progress dozens of nations across the region continents on everything to establish a new partnership to maritime Atlantic cooperation. Just yesterday, the coastal Atlantic countries, 2 consultations better cooperate. The United States brought together technology, dozens of nations environmental protection, and to establish a new partnership for Atlantic cooperation. Brought together nearly 100 countries, so that the coastal Atlantic countries coalition to counter fentanyl, better cooperate on science, synthetic drugs, technology, to reduce environmental protection, the human cost, sustainable economic development. We brought together nearly 100 countries as the nature of the global coalition to counter fentanyl and the geography expands to new places to reduce. We're working with our partners to bring capabilities to bear, to disrupt plotting, degrade networks, and protect all of our people. The nature of the terrorist threats evolve. Additionally, and the geography expands to new places. We convene the summit. We're working with our partners to strengthen democratic institutions, to disrupt plotting, root out corruption, and degrade network violence. Protect all of our people. In this moment, where democratically elected governments have been toppled in quick succession, we convene the Summit for Democracy to strengthen democratic institutions. This work is as urgent, root out corruption and reject political violence. And in this moment, where democratically elected governments have been toppled in quick succession in West and Central Africa, we're reminded that this work is as urgent and important as ever. We stand with the African Union and ECOWAS and other regional bodies to support constitutional rule. We will not retreat from the values that make us strong. We will defend democracy, our best tool to meet the challenges we face around the world. And we're working to show how democracy can deliver in ways that matter to people's lives. The Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment addresses the enormous need and opportunity for infrastructure investment in low and middle income countries, particularly in Africa, Latin America. Addresses the enormous need and opportunity for infrastructure investment in low and middle projects that have high standards for workers, the environment, and intellectual property while avoiding the trap of unsustainable debt. We're focusing on economic corridors that will maximize the impact of our collective investment and deliver consequential results across multiple countries and multiple sectors. For example, the Libido Corridor will extend across Africa from the western port of Angola to the DRC to Zambia, boosting regional connectivity and strengthening commerce and food security in Africa. Similarly, the groundbreaking effort we announced at the G20 to connect India to Europe through the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel will spur opportunities and investment across 2 continents. This is part of our effort to build a more sustainable, integrated Middle East. It demonstrates how Israel's greater normalization and economic connection with its neighbors is delivering positive and practical impacts, even as we continue to work tirelessly to peace between the Israelis and Palestinians, 2 states for 2 people. Now, let me be clear. None of these partnerships are about containing any country. They're about a positive vision for our shared future. When it comes to China, I want to be clear and consistent. We seek to responsibly manage the competition between our countries so it does not tip into conflict. I've said we are for de-risking, not decoupling with China. We will push back on aggression and intimidation and defend the rules of the road, from freedom of navigation to overflight to level economic playing field that have helped safeguard security and prosperity for decades. But we also stand ready to work together with China on issues where progress hinges on our common efforts. Nowhere is that more critical than accelerating the climate crisis, than the accelerating climate crisis. We see it everywhere. Record-breaking heat waves in the United States and China, wildfires ravaging North America and Southern Europe, a fifth year of drought in the Horn of Africa, tragic flooding in Libya. My heart goes out to the people of Libya. That's killed thousands of people. Together, these snapshots tell an urgent story of what awaits. For one day, my administration, the United States, has treated this crisis as an existential threat from the moment we took office, not only for us, but for all of humanity. Last year, I signed into law in the United States the largest investment ever anywhere in the history of the world to combat the climate crisis and help move the global economy toward a clean energy future. We're also working with the Congress to quadruple our climate financing to help developing countries reach their climate goals and adapt to climate impacts. And this year, the world's on track to meet the climate finance pledge that made under the Paris Agreement, $100 billion to raise collectively. But we need more investment from public and private sector alike, especially in places that have contributed so little to global emissions, but face some of the worst effects of climate change, like the Pacific Islands. The United States is working directly with the Pacific Island Forum to help these nations adapt, build resilience to the climate impacts, even as we lead the effort to build innovative new partnerships that attack the global challenges from all sides. From the First Movers Coalition, which is mobilizing billions of private sector community and the private sector commitments, to creating a market demand for green products in carbon-intense sectors like concrete, shipping, aviation, and trucking, to the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate, which is bringing farmers into the climate solution and making our food supply more resilient to climate shocks, and the Global Methane Pledge, now endorsed by more than 150 countries, which expands our focus beyond our carbon emission targets to reduce the potential greenhouse gases in our atmosphere by 30% in this decade. It's all within our capacity. We need to bring the same commitment and urgency and ambition as we work together to meet the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. These goals were adopted at the United Nations in 2015 as a roadmap for improving lives around the world. But the hard truth is, for decades of progress, the world has lost ground these past years in the wake of COVID-19, conflicts, and other crises. The United States is committing to doing its part to get us back on track. All told, in the first 2 years of my administration, the United States has invested more than $100 billion to drive development progress in bolstering food security, expanding access to education worldwide, strengthening healthcare systems, and fighting disease. And we've helped mobilize billions more in the private sector investments. But to accelerate our forward progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, we all have to do more. We need to build new partnerships that change the way we tackle this challenge, to unlock trillions of additional financing for development, drawing on all sources. We need to fill the gaps and address the failures of our existing system exposed by the pandemic. We need to ensure that women and girls benefit fully from our progress. We must also do more to grapple with the debt that holds back so many low and middle-income countries. When nations are forced to service unsustainable debt payments over the needs of their own people, it makes it harder for them to invest in their own futures. And as we work together to recover from global shocks, the United States will also continue to be the largest single country donor of humanitarian assistance at this moment of unparalleled need in the world. Folks, cooperation, partnership, these are the keys to progress and the challenges that affect us all, and the baseline for responsible global leadership. We don't need to agree on everything to keep moving forward on issues like arms control, a cornerstone of international security. After more than 50 years of progress under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Russia is shredding long-standing arms control agreements, including announcing the suspension of the New START and withdrawing from the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty. I view it as irresponsible and makes the entire world less safe. The United States is going to continue to pursue good faith efforts to reduce the threat of weapons of mass destruction and lead by example, no matter what else is happening in the world. This year, we safely destroyed at least the last chemical munitions in the U.S. stockpile, fulfilling our commitment toward a world free of chemical weapons. And we condemn the DPRK's continued violation of UN Security Council resolutions, but we are committed to diplomacy that will bring about the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We're working with our partners to address Iran's destabilizing activities that threaten regional and global security, and remain steadfast in our commitment that Iran must never acquire a nuclear weapon. Now, even as we evolve our institutions and drive creative new partnerships, let me be clear. Certain principles of our international system are sacrosanct. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, human rights. These are the core tenets of the UN Charter, the pillars for peaceful relations among nations, without which we cannot achieve any of our goals. That has not changed, and that must not change. Yet, for the second year in a row, this gathering, dedicated to peaceful resolution of conflicts, is darkened by the shadow of war. An illegal war of conquest brought without provocation by Russia against its neighbor Ukraine. Like every nation in the world, the United States wants this war to end. No nation wants this war to end more than Ukraine. And we strongly support Ukraine in its efforts to bring about a diplomatic resolution that delivers just and lasting peace. But Russia alone bears responsibility for this war. Russia alone has the power to end this war immediately. And it's Russia alone that stands in the way of peace, because Russia's price for peace is Ukraine's capitulation, Ukraine's territory, and Ukraine's children. Russia believes that the world will grow weary and allow it to brutalize Ukraine without consequence. But I ask you this: if we abandon the core principles of the United States to appease an aggressor, can any member state in this body feel confident that they are protected? If you allow Ukraine to be carved up, is the independence of any nation secure? I'd respectfully suggest the answer is no. We have to stand up to this naked aggression today and deter other would-be aggressors tomorrow. That's why the United States, together with our allies and partners around the world, will continue to stand with the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereignty and territorial integrity and their freedom. It's not only an investment in Ukraine's future, but in the future of every country that seeks a world governed by basic rules that apply equally to all nations and uphold the rights of every nation, no matter how big or small. Sovereignty, territorial integrity, they are the fixed foundations of this noble body. And universal human rights is its North Star We cannot sacrifice either. 75 years ago, Universal Declaration of Human Rights captured a remarkable act of collective hope. I say that again, collective hope. Drafted by a committee representing different regions, faiths, philosophies, and adopted by the entire General Assembly. The rights contained in the Declaration are elemental and enduring. And while we still struggle to uphold equal and inalienable rights of all, they remain ever steady and ever true. We cannot turn away from abuses, whether in Xinjiang, Tehran, Darfur, or anywhere else. We have to continue working to ensure that women and girls enjoy equal rights and equal participation in their societies. That indigenous groups, racial, ethnic, religious minorities, people with disabilities do not have their potential stifled by systemic discrimination. That the LGBTQI plus people are not prosecuted or targeted with violence because of who they are. These rights are part of our shared humanity. They're absent. When they're absent anywhere, their loss is felt everywhere. They are essential to the advancement of human progress that brings us together. My fellow leaders, let me close with this. At this inflection point in history, we're going to be judged by whether or not we live up to the promises we made to ourselves, to each other, to the most vulnerable, and to all those who will inherit the world we create, because that's what we're doing. Will we find within ourselves the courage to do what must be done, to preserve the planet, to protect human dignity, to provide opportunity for people everywhere, and to defend the tenets of the United Nations? There can only be one answer to that question. We must, and we will. The road ahead is long and difficult, but if we persevere, and prevail, if we keep the faith in ourselves and show what's possible, let's do this work together. Let's deliver progress for everyone. Let's bend the arc of history for the good of the world, because it's in our power to do it. Thank you for listening. You're kind.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the United States of America for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. May I request representatives to remain seated while we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes before resuming to hear the next speaker.
meeting is resumed and you can
Yeah. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the meeting is resumed. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego, President of the Republic of Colombia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego, President of the Republic of Colombia, and invite him to address the Assembly. Extraordinary. Sorry, sir. I have to repair the gavel. This is extraordinary. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, can I ask that the Assembly come to order to receive the statement of His Excellency Gustavo Petro Urrego, President of the Republic of Colombia. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Antonio, Dennis, my wife Veronica, and my youngest daughter Veronica here. I, a week ago, was in Santiago de Chile, and I've made my journey to here from there to commemorate the 50th anniversary of a homicidal and bloody coup against President Salvador Allende. I then went through my own country and a popular neighborhood of Medellin, where the mafia used to attract young people to offer them the possibility of learning computer programming. I then arrived in Havana, an unjustly blockaded country, where a president of my country suggested and achieved that it be included in the list of terrorist-sponsoring countries simply because it helped to make peace in Colombia. And now I am here, ladies and gentlemen, to make my speech to you. Over this year, since the last speech that I gave in the United Nations, we have only seen a deepening of what the wealthy, meeting in Davos, call a polycrisis. The war is continuing. Hunger continues. The recession is increasing, and the climate crisis has shown its teeth as never before, claiming thousands of lives and heating our lands and our seas like never before. This has been a year where humanity has been losing and has unfailingly hastened the era of extinction. All of these crises are, in fact, just one crisis: the crisis of life. It seems that world leaders have become the enemies of life. The crisis of life is being expressed in one devastating indicator. This began at the furthest corners of the earth, far away from the remotest regions, a silent march of people from different cultures who are intermingling on their way like an infinitely nuanced painting. The colors are mixing together in an uncontainable march. A multitude of all the colors is moving along the tracks, through the seas, through the jungles. It is making up a kind of work of art on the canvas of the earth. A flow of tones, sounds, different clothes and cultures in an amalgam which does not forget its beginnings. In an amalgam in a great march from the south to the north. This is the exodus of humanity which has begun. Today, there are tens of millions. Tomorrow, according to experts, by 2070, the figure will have reached 3 billion, fleeing from their beloved homes because these homes will be uninhabitable. In my homeland, the country of beauty, Colombia, the country of an explosion of life, by 2070, only deserts will remain. The people will go to the north, no longer attracted by the mirage of wealth, but rather by something simpler, something more vital, water. Since the beginnings, the millenary beginnings of humanity, people have gone to where water is, to the north. Billions of people will defy armies and will change the earth to do this. This exodus of the peoples to the north is an exact reflection of the dimension of the failure of governments. This last year has been a time of defeat for governments, a defeat for humanity. The exodus across the borders has increased. They have set the dogs and the hounds on the immigrants. They have put people on horses to pursue them, with whips in their hands, with stocks and chains. They have built prisons. So much the hatred has grown of the foreign, of the strange. These prisons have even been built at sea, so that these women and men cannot tread the earth of the white people who still believe themselves to be the superior race and are nostalgic for this. And through their choices and elections, they revive the leader who said so and who killed millions as a result. The exodus has increased over this year, showing how much the crisis of life is advancing. But the minutes are ticking on in defining life or death on our planet. And rather than halting this march of time and talking about how to defend life for the future, thanks to greater knowledge and expanding life to the universe, we are deciding instead to waste our time killing one another. We are not thinking about how to expand life to the stars, but rather how to end life on our own planet. We have devoted ourselves to war. We have been called to war. Latin America has been called upon to produce war machines, men to go to the killing fields. They are forgetting that our countries have been invaded several times by the very same people who are now talking about combating invasions. They are forgetting that for oil, Iraq was invaded, Syria and Libya. They are forgetting that the same reasons they used to defend Zelensky are those very reasons which should be deployed to defend Palestine. They forget that to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, all wars must be brought to an end. But they are helping to wage one war in particular, because world powers see this suiting themselves in their gamesmanship, in their games of hunger, and they're forgetting to bring an end to the other war, because for these powers, this did not suit them. What is the difference between Ukraine and Palestine, I ask? Is it not time to bring an end to both wars and other wars too, and make the most of the short time we have to build paths to save life on the planet? As President of Colombia, this country of beauty, of a group of millions of workers women and men from popular neighbourhoods, indigenous people, Afro-descendants, people from the fields, workers, young people of all colours. I'm the president these people decided to elect in the majority, and I'm here to speak before you. And I propose bringing an end to this war so that we have time to save ourselves. I propose that the United Nations should hold, as soon as possible, 2 peace conferences, one on Ukraine, the other on Palestine. Not because there are no other wars in the world, as there are in my country, but because this would guide the way to making peace in all regions of the planet. Because both of these alone can bring an end to the hypocrisy as a political practice. Because we could be sincere, a virtue without which we cannot be warriors for life itself. The generation which today must decide and must act as soon as possible to overcome the enormous hurricane which has been unleashed against life from the dark but powerful forces of greed, the hurricane of capital, which only looks to profit and which has swallowed up the planet and the very foundation of our existence. I propose bringing an end to war, to defend life from the climate crisis, which is the mother of all crises. This summit has been established to evaluate the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals established by the governments for 2030. It's easy to carry out an assessment. These human development goals will not be achieved. We are far from reaching them. We have moved backwards. The United Nations Human Development Objectives could more simply be called social and environmental justice. Social justice will not be achieved for humanity by 2030 because what we have sown is injustice in our planet. What has been created over these years is injustice. The injustice of putting the vaccine against the deadly virus on the market, concentrating it in rich countries. Latin America saw 30% of COVID deaths, although it makes up only 8% of the world population. Who said that health should be a business and not a right? Millions of older people and others died because the vaccine was traded rather than being a common good of humanity. They failed to deliver on their own promise to finance adaptation to climate change. They do not have $100 billion to give to countries to defend themselves from floods, storms, and hurricanes. But they do have that money in a single day to allow Russians and Ukrainians to kill one another. Now we no longer need $100 billion. We need $3 trillion to overcome the climate crisis. And the clock is ticking. Ladies and gentlemen, injustice has been sown. And cannabis growers and coca growers have been arrested rather than tackling the solitude in which the youth of their own countries live. These countries are the greatest economic and military power in the history of humanity. To combat this solitude, they have moved on to the drugs of death, to fentanyl. They wanted a war against the drugs of the rebellious youth who opposed the war in Vietnam, the marijuana and the LSD of the hippies. And they ended up driving their society towards the drug of neoliberalism and competition, the drug of the Manhattan yuppie, cocaine. And they imprisoned millions of Africans and Latin Americans in cold, private prisons. And 1 million Latin Americans were killed. Democracies were destroyed in our America. But they never arrested the Manhattan yuppie. And now they are facing the grand outcome of the prohibition of drugs, fentanyl, which is not killing 4,000, but 100,000 young people every year in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, they sowed injustice. And the worst of these has been to condemn humanity to war. So today, the balance of social justice across the world is so skewed. The problem is that this was not an issue of socialists, of progressives. Rather, it was a matter where the time left to the planet was flowing away. As president of the country of beauty, I propose returning to a time of simplicity to recover the time lost. So ending the war and reforming the global financial system. From the conferences, the peace conferences on Ukraine and Palestine, we should come out able to build a reform that we have already discussed in the Amazon forest, where the greatest river of the earth, which has crossed the greatest jungle of the earth, reaches the sea. We had discussed this in Brasilia, and we went to Kenya to meet with the brotherly peoples of Africa, where we came from at the time of one of the other great injustices of power, slavery. And we went to Paris to see whether multitudes there were still crying for liberty, equality, and fraternity. And we went to Washington to talk to the president and see whether we in the North and the South of the Americas could meet again, as we did in the past, over 2 centuries ago, where we met in history to talk about liberty, equality, democracy, and republic. And let us talk in all possible ways about getting to the root of the climate crisis and its solution. If fossil capitalism has no financing, it will die. Its death throes will be hard, but this is necessary for there to be humanity, nature, and life. The decarbonized capitalism will have to be financed, but we know that green capital will only flow to places where there is profit. That is what governs it. And its structure is a very narrow one to contain the decarbonization of the entire world. Governments and powers who still believe that the climate crisis and that of life can be overcome with cheap loans are mistaken. They are deluded to propose that those countries of the earth which are already indebted are indebted as a result of disease and greed, and that they can use more loans to overcome a problem that only the belching chimneys of the north have produced. It is not possible to overcome the crisis of life, this mega crisis, with more indebtedness. The financing of life, the flow of medicines, which must be pumped into the veins of the economies and societies of the world to meet the challenge of leaving behind coal and oil under the earth, leaving it under the earth in those very places where the true veins of the earth flow, as Roberto Cobarilla, the Ua indigenous native from Colombia, said over 30 years ago. As he said, extracting oil was to remove the blood from the earth, and life would then die. The majority of the investment to decarbonize the world's economy should come from public funds, the efforts of societies, bringing together states so as to bring together humanity. Today they call this multilateralism. Governing the earth with the vision of democracy and not a vision of empire. Empires do not save life. They merely unleash wars. If the mega crisis of life is to be resolved, it will be through a democracy which achieves a global scale, a deeper democracy, which will not fear interlinking states and societies and planning for the great Marshall Plan of the revitalization of the planet. The market will help us somewhat, but we cannot ask for solutions from a mechanism which has no humanity. And when it was this mechanism which produced the very problem. Private funds can be used, but they will be limited by their own logic. The force to do this will come from public funds, and these funds are currently weakened by debt. The great battle of our generation is defending life for our children and grandchildren, and this can only be fully financed by what is public, by what belongs to all of us. We must liberate the public to save life. Many people may not like this, but if the voice of the public, of the state, of humanity, of multilateralism is to be heard again, this means the voice of change will be heard again. Because in order to save life, this is fundamental. Saving life requires an epoch of change, and it is urgent. Change and life are now synonymous. Youth of all colours today, in order to live, must fly the flags of change, of transformation, of a new humanity. It is democracy and not authoritarian regimes which is looking more and more like the Nazis. It is global democracy. These plans, the power of those states who are not tackling war, but are tackling and attacking the plans for life. These plans to achieve the transition to a decarbonized economy and to finance it. The decarbonized economy will, without a doubt, be a more humane and a more just economy. So, I, as President of the Country of Beauty, propose a reform of the global financial system, of the IMF, of the Multilateral Bank, and bringing an end to economic blockades and guiding funds from private capital. If everybody's debt is reduced, paying off the creditors with an IMF issuance of special drawing rights, there will be a decrease in the global public debt and a real increase in budgets and public funds. In this way, we will be able to finance the Marshall Plan for the Sustainable Development Goals, for the social and environmental justice of the planet. The plan to overcome, through mitigation and adaptation, the climate crisis, which is the crisis of life. This is reviving Keynes worldwide after forgetting him. This wise old man already said this, as did other wise people before him, and their words too are forgotten. The words that they expressed from their deep ideas. What a beautiful perspective in the midst of today's darkness and storms. A perspective which looks hopeful. The objective of life and justice can be achieved by treading the path of global democracy and of returning value to what is public, to what is common and shared, which can be reached by all. I want my grandchildren, who are babies today, Luna, Victoria and Luca, and my daughter Antonella, to be able to live far from the apocalypse and the era of extinction. I want them to live in times where humanity was able to stop killing itself and killing the planet, and through the very diversity of its cultures, managed to achieve understanding and to achieve its mission, spreading the virus of life to the stars of the universe. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Colombia for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Majesty King Abdullah II ibn al-Hussein II, King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. I request protocol to escort His Majesty. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Majesty King Abdullah II ibn al-Hussein King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Mr. President, Secretary General, Excellencies, when human catastrophes seem beyond description, we turn to the appalling statistics. This year around the world, more than 345 million people face food insecurity, daily hunger, or starvation. Among the most vulnerable are 108 million refugees, people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes and ways of life. And 40% of these refugees are children, the most defenseless of all. Yet these numbers cannot really convey the tragedy or the failure. Refugees are our brothers, our sisters. They look to our countries to help end the crises that have driven them from home. Refugees are mothers, fathers, grandparents who have made perilous journeys to save their families. They are young people with big dreams and little children who deserve the chance to dream big. They depend on the international community for their survival, and multiple UN agencies provide vital services to help meet the need. But in recent months, one by one, these agencies have been delivering difficult news. A severe shortfall in international funds has forced them to cut support. Is this what we've come to? Is the international community going to watch as refugee families find themselves forced to send their children to work instead of school? In Jordan, where refugees make up over 1/3 of our 11 million population, cuts have already thrown the lives of hundreds of thousands of refugees into uncertainty. The impact of such humanitarian shortfalls is never limited to a country or a region. Fear and want bring on sharp increases in the number of refugees fleeing to Europe and beyond, on journeys that too often end in tragedy. My friends, Jordanians are serious about our duty to those in need. We have done everything we can to secure a dignified life for refugees. Nearly half of the almost 1.4 million Syrians we host are under 18 years of age. For many of them, Jordan is the only place they have ever known. Over 230,000 Syrian children have been born in Jordan since 2011. We are sharing precious resources to help them meet basic needs: food, energy, and especially water. We are among the water-poorest countries in the world, even as our water supplies face extraordinary demand. And we face these pressures just when another crisis has hit our region: climate change, with its destructive heat waves, drought, and flooding. And to meet the refugee burden, we have been carefully managing to combine our limited resources with essential support from the international community. To refugees has surpassed our limits. Syrian refugees' future is in their country, not in host countries. But until they are able to return, we must all do right by them. And the fact is, refugees are far from returning. On the contrary, more Syrians are likely to leave their country as the crisis persists. And Jordan will not have the ability nor the resources to host and care for more. We must find a political solution consistent with UN Security Council Resolution 2254, the step-for-step approach that offers a path forward, proposed by Jordan as the basis for engagement with the Syrian government and coordinated with the UN. This approach sets a roadmap to incrementally resolve the crisis and deal with all its consequences. Until then, we will protect our country against any future threats the crisis could pose to our national security. My friends, Jordan's case is a microcosm of our entire region. For all our people's immense potential, repeated crises have held back the promise of greater development and prosperity. Our region is a focal point where some of the most urgent global challenges are converging. How will our world respond? Will we come together in global solidarity to get to the root of the problem, the conflicts and the crises that destroy life and hope? Will we work as one to rebuild the lost trust in international action and help those in want? My friends, our region will continue to suffer until the world helps lift the shadow of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the central issue in the Middle East. No architecture for regional security and development can stand over the burning ashes of this conflict. But 7.5 decades on, it still smolders. Where are we going? Without clarity on where Palestinians' future lies, it will be impossible to converge on a political solution to this conflict. Five million Palestinians live under occupation. No civil rights, no freedoms of mobility, no say in their lives. Yet every UN resolution since the beginning of this conflict recognizes the equal rights of the Palestinian people to a future of peace, dignity, and hope. This is the heart of the two-state solution, the only path to a comprehensive, lasting peace. We can see the Israeli people actively defending and engaging in the expression of their national identity. Yet the Palestinian people are deprived of that same right to express and fulfill their own national identity. The basic requirement for that right is the establishment of their own independent and viable state on the June 4th, 1967 lines, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living alongside Israel in peace, security, and prosperity. And delaying justice and peace has brought endless cycles of violence. 2023 has been the deadliest for the Palestinian people in the past 15 years. How can people trust in global justice while settlement building, land confiscations, and home demolitions continue? Where is the global solidarity to make UN resolutions believable by people in need of our help? Jerusalem is a flashpoint for global concern. Under the Hashemite custodianship of Islamic and Christian holy sites, Jordan remains committed to safeguarding the city's identity. But preserving Jerusalem as the city of faith and peace for Islam, Christianity, and Judaism is a responsibility that we all share. And we must not abandon Palestinian refugees to the forces of despair. Sustainable funding is urgently needed by UNRWA, the UN agency that provides vital relief, education, and health services to millions of Palestinian refugees. And this is essential to protect families, keep communities stable, and prepare young people for productive lives. We must protect young Palestinians from extremists who prey on their frustrations and hopelessness by making sure they continue to learn at the schools under the blue flag of the United Nations, as the alternative will be the black flags of terror, hate, and extremism. My friends, we come together here as partners to deal with our challenges and shape a better future. We speak here for our people. We speak for families and the younger generations. We speak for victims of conflict, displacement, hunger, climate challenge, disasters, and more. They are not mere statistics. They are our fellow human beings sharing our world. Only by restoring trust, only by acting in solidarity, will we create the future all our peoples desire and deserve. We cannot allow for a lost generation on our watch. Thank you.
I wish to thank the King of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Majesty. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Andrzej Duda, President of the Republic of Poland. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Good morning, Excellency.
Morning, Excellency. How are you? On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Andrzej Duda, President of the Republic of Poland, and invite him to address the Assembly.
Distinguished Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, honorable delegates, I wish to congratulate His Excellency Mr. Denis Francis on his election to the honorable function of the President of the 78th United Nations General Assembly. I wish to express Poland's full support for his mission and wish him every success in its fulfillment. At the same time, my thanks go out to His Excellency Csaba Kőrösi in recognition of his active engagement while presiding over the work of the 77th session of the General Assembly. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, 193 countries from every continent have gathered in New York at UN headquarters to discuss the most important threats and challenges facing the world today. The United Nations General Assembly is an extremely important event. It is the only place and the only opportunity to debate in our midst the crucial problems that affect us all. We are here because of the courageous and forward-looking decisions made by the leaders of the Western world during the darkest days of the Second World War. At that time, they pondered over how to avoid similar tragedies in the future. The leaders of the United States and Great Britain, President Roosevelt and Prime Minister Churchill, and soon the other countries of the anti-Hitler coalition, including Poland, signed the Atlantic Charter. It contained the most important principles on which the post-war world order was to be based. self-determination of nations, inviolability of borders, renunciation of violence, economic cooperation, human rights. The Atlantic Charter, together with the Washington Declaration, were the cornerstone in a building of the United Nations organization. Ladies and gentlemen, today once again, it befell on us to live in dangerous times. As a result of Russia's full-scale aggression on Ukraine, hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives or suffered injuries. Millions were forced to flee their own home country, and hundreds of millions worldwide are facing the specter of famine and serious economic disruptions. Russia's brutal aggression brought immense global problems in its aftermath. It put to a test international world order. Costs of those barbarian actions, humanitarian, material, and environmental, are incalculable and still growing. For long, world peace has never been as threatened as it is today. We, Poles, know fully well that peace is not to be taken for granted. September in the history of my home country is a special month. On 1st September 1939, Nazi Germany invaded my homeland, Poland. The Second World War broke out. On 17th September 1939, we received a blow from another direction. The Soviet Union also made an onslaught on Poland. In the wake of the alliance between Hitler and Stalin, Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, Poland lost its independence, was wiped out from the map of the world, and subjected to extremely brutal occupation. This is precisely why we understand the tragedy of Ukraine better than any other country in the world, and the tragedy of other countries experiencing the pandemonium of war. In the Second World War, 6 million of our citizens perished, including 3 million Polish Jews, and Warsaw, the capital of Poland, was razed to the ground. And yet our history stands as a testament that even crimes and persecution are not able to suppress the true spirit of freedom, that freedom will finally prevail. Enslavement, imperialism, and neocolonialism are a denial of freedom as much as insane dreams of dominating the others. When unleashing the war in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin wanted to restore the Russian Empire, to divide the world, and to make Europe systematically dependent on his raw materials. He has not succeeded. It is my firm belief that he will no longer succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, today the world needs courageous and visionary leaders. The late President of Poland, Lech Kaczyński, with whom I had the honor to cooperate, was such a leader. The leader who a dozen of years ago was trying to shake the conscience, to appeal to politicians, to warn of imperial policy of Vladimir Putin's Russia. Let me recall at this point his seminal words said in Tbilisi at the height of Russian aggression on Georgia in 2008. For the first time in a long time, Russians have shown the face we have known for hundreds of years. They believe that the nations around them should be subjected to them. We say no. Russia believes that the old days of the empire that collapsed less than 20 years ago are coming back. That domination will again be feature of our region. Well, it will not. Those days are over, once and for all. Yes, today, in this very place, at the United Nations headquarters, I wish to reiterate, those days can never return. The logic of conquest, changing borders by force, disregarding the law, and denying the Ukrainian people their right to exist must be stopped. This brutal war must end and not be converted into a frozen war. This can only be done by restoring the full territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Ladies and gentlemen, Poland's position in the face of any war is clear and straightforward. We demand absolute respect for internationally recognized national borders. The inviolability of these borders is a fundamental element of the world order. Today, the victim is Ukraine. Tomorrow, it could be any one of us if we do not follow these ironclad rules, if we do not insistently enforce compliance with international law. Forgotten and unpunished war crimes, crimes against humanity, build a sense of impunity among the perpetrators. Such crimes give permission to their successors and imitators who, following suit, commit similar crimes when they want to dominate and determine the fate of other states and nations. The crimes in a war in Ukraine are the living proof thereof. That is why we are engaged in initiative to hold Russia accountable for gross violations of fundamental norms of international law. We strongly support the work of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. We support the work of the Independent International Commission under the UN Human Rights Council to investigate violation of human rights and humanitarian law in the context of Russian aggression and to collect, verify, and preserve evidence. We support the idea of establishing an ad hoc special tribunal. The crimes must be accounted for and the perpetrators punished. Ladies and gentlemen, information wherefore goes on. Lie is used to cover up and justify Russian crimes on civilian population. Russia continually tries to shape international public opinion by building a false vision of the reality. In Poland, this comes as no surprise to us, but the world is just about to discover the scale of manipulation and disinformation. This spearhead is often directed also at my country, Poland, labeled in many various ways. This is because we have consistently been opposing Russia's imperial and neo-colonial policy and have supported Ukraine in its defense from the outset. We, as international community, must draw conclusions from the situation. We must confront manipulation and disinformation. We must fight against the hypocrisy of history, the reversal of the roles of the henchman and a victim. What is evil should be called evil. A crime should be called a crime. Ladies and gentlemen, these days, many states are blamed for prolonging the war as they supply necessary weapons to Ukraine in its defense war. This is a completely false logic, as if putting the blame on a neighbor who comes to aid to the people next door defending their own home against mugger. If someone attacks your household, you have the right to defend it, and the neighbors should not to stay indifferent. Ukraine would not be able to resist the aggression and effectively stand for its independence if it were not for the assistance of other countries, and primarily on the biggest scale, the United States of America. It is the United States that has been playing a pivotal role in assuring security in Europe for more than a century. I'm saying so as a president of the European country which was plagued by war experience on so many occasions. It must be remembered that the engagement of the United States in the First World War led it to an end, as much as to the restoration of independence by Poland and by other countries of the Central and Eastern Europe. The United States played a pivotal role in defeating Nazi Germany. Without the US support, neither the United Kingdom nor the Soviet Union would have been able to resist Hitler. Finally, the United States was instrumental in the reconstruction of Western Europe in the aftermath of war and in fending off the threat posed by the Soviet Union throughout the Cold War. It is too often that Europe tends to forget that it owes its security and prosperity to the US commitment and presence. In Poland, we recall this very well. That is why Poland's top priority for the time of our presidency of the European Union in the first half of 2025 will be enhancing transatlantic relations and cooperation between the EU and the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, Poland has never had colonies, the fact of which we are proud. We emphasize it on all occasions. Instead, my home country was many times brutally attacked, destroyed, and used by the neighbors with their imperial ambitions. For 123 years, Poland disappeared from the maps of the world. That is why we understand very well the countries that suffered colonialism and the challenges they need to confront. Wherever the international community is in need, Poland is always ready to respond to the call and without any hesitation. We provide assistance in many corners of the world. Despite the war in the immediate neighborhood, we will continue our support to the Eastern Partnership countries. We continue to focus on countries of the sub-Saharan region. We are present in the Middle East. Given the refugee crisis caused by the war in Syria, Poland's assistance to Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, and Jordan will be maintained. Poland will also continue its humanitarian support. Many places around the world are facing worsening food crisis. The situation is most difficult in Africa, where 1 in 5 people is suffering from hunger. Also, the population suffering hunger is increasing in West Asia and the Caribbean. Today, an estimated 2.4 billion people lack sustainable regular access to food, of which some 900 million face severe food insecurity. Therefore, in 2022, we in Poland have supported the World Food Fund activities in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, including Lebanon, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Syria. We found our activities mainly through multilateral channels, as well as through Polish NGOs and their local partners. Poland fully recognizes the ambitions of the African Union to play an even more active role in the on the global stage. Ensuring peace and development in Africa will be facilitated by good and cost-effective governance and the development of democracy on the continent. We respect African solutions to African problems, standing ready to share the experience we have gained in the difficult but successful transformation of our economy. Ladies and gentlemen, Poland is a country of freedom and solidarity. It is known worldwide for the great solidarity movement, which not only stood for workers' rights, but also for freedom and fundamental values. The movement which brought together millions of people courageously defense of my compatriots committed themselves to bring aid to the people fleeing the nightmare of war. In the very first days of the war, many journalists were coming to Poland and invariably asked me, "Where are the refugee camps?" And my response was, "There are not any. There are not." There was no talk about camps. We hosted our guests in our own homes. We also had the honor of hosting many world leaders who came bringing humanitarian aid, including the United Nations Secretary General and other United Nations high-ranking officials. Thank you for your support and for your presence. Greater solidarity must come as a response to the evil, the war, and aggression. Without solidarity, there will be no lasting peace. Ladies and gentlemen, the world today needs more solidarity. We believe that the idea of solidarity-based development, which we hold so dear, is a beacon for security and prosperity. Poland is ready to take on concrete measures to support the United Nations operation undertaken to confront the most fundamental global challenges and threats, social and economic crisis. We wish to support the idea of just transition of economic and social changes that will not lose sight of the human dimension so that nobody is left behind. We believe that our experience as a leader of Central Europe, the fifth economy in European Union, and the largest state in a Three Seas initiative can prove valuable, and many countries which vary in degrees of economic and social development. We are ready to share with our partners from around the world not only our experience in the process of economic transformation, but also specific technologies that many Polish companies have available. Poland is proud to have been elected as a member of the United Nations Economic and Social Council for the 2024-2026 term. A key priority for our ECOSOC membership will be to draw the international community's attention to the impact of global crises, such as armed conflicts, the energy crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and climate change, their impact on socio-economic development. Time is running out to achieve the goals of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, and there are still many challenges ahead, so we must unite and intensify our efforts to accelerate the implementation of the individual tasks. Ladies and gentlemen,